All right, so something we've been enjoying really since we started the show, but a lot more recently is finding these unique lists or just tidbits, fun facts from around the league and discuss it. And so this one I found just scrolling through social media, and it's a good one, Mark. It's one that probably pains you a little bit because it does include your arch nemesis on there, but
I'm very
it's a
painful.
list of I like they incorporate defensive players and offensive players, so
Yeah,
it's not just like a quarterback thing.
yeah.
It's players that own other teams, so like just have had dominant performances over dominant performance against a particular opponent. Obviously, that's almost always a divisional opponent. But we got quarterbacks, we got DBs, we got defensive linemen, all that good stuff. So we'll just dive right in here and parse through this bad boy.
Yeah, one of the things I love about this is when you sent this to me is like a hey, what do you think of this? My instant reaction is like, if you try to think about like teams dominating other teams, you instantly go to like the big rivalries too, like NFC East rivalries. But in a lot of times, or like Steelers, Ravens, but a lot of times those are fairly kind of even. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You
It's
have to
hard to have
think
someone
about
dominate.
yeah, you have to think
Yeah.
about like the no, you're getting owned by this person or this team. So it's that bottom of the barrel teams versus those teams perennially on top. And when you start to think of that, you get a lot of the Peyton Mannings, you get a lot of the dominant quarterbacks, the Tom Brady's, Aaron Rodgers, and that shows certainly on this list for sure.
Yeah, no question about it. So let's pull this bad boy up and get going. So yeah, obviously at the very top is your guy Aaron Rodgers
My
against the
God.
Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears. He's had quite the run. So I'll let you introduce this stat here if you don't mind.
Well, depressingly, I will read it, and I don't want to have to read it, but I will. Uh, 25-5 all time against the Chicago
Yeah.
Bears, Aaron Rodgers. Um, I think about that, and it is that's really like insane. I've gone in to 30 different Bears versus Packers games when the Packers have Aaron Rodgers as starting quarterback. And every single one of them, I think to myself, this is the time. And I've only won
You've
five,
been right 5 times.
only won five of those. He really is. He is the definition of owning a team, a franchise. And I think Bears fans, no one can deny it or admit it. Like one of my favorite moments ever as a Bears fan was Khalil Mack injuring Aaron Rodgers in Khalil Mack's first game and injuring that shoulder and thinking to myself, oh my God, this was the greatest move of all time, getting Khalil Mack. He injures Aaron Rodgers in the first game of the season, the first appearance. And the Bears are, I think, leading at halftime against that game in Lambeau. And the bad man came back out at halftime after seeming like he was broken. And he lit up the Bears in the second half. And Khalil Mack was a no-show in the second half. And it was like most of my experiences in Bears Packers, extraordinarily heartbreaking and disappointing from there on out.
Yeah, it's a rough go for the Bears fans during the Aaron Rodgers era. Even during the Brett Favre era too,
Well, yeah.
although it wasn't as stark of a contrast, but yeah, still a pretty tough pill to swallow. But looks like the Jordan Love era might not be as intimidating.
Let's
We'll
hope
go with
to
that for now.
God the Bears aren't 25. If the Bears are 25-5 and 30 starts against Jordan Love, I may be on suicide watch.
It's that's
I
rough.
don't know how
That's
else to
rough.
say it.
Yeah. Tom Brady has instilled a similar feeling in the Buffalo
Crazy.
Bills for the last 20 years. And now they're finally rid of him. But yeah, with the New England Patriots and even, in his career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a 33-3 all time record against the Buffalo Bills. That's crazy to think of that Buffalo has come away with 3 wins when you play a team twice a season in such that long storied career and history between those two. 72 touchdowns as well. So he's almost throwing 2 touchdowns a game, or more than 2 touchdowns a game, I should say, to these
Yeah, I
three.
mean,
So
you
wild.
see his dominance against a team like that, and it makes sense like why Tom Brady's stats are as insane as they are. And one of these things, you have to argue a lot with a lot of these stats is like, oh, okay, well, no, like Tom Brady is the only great because he only played Buffalo well, or is Buffalo just been that downtrodden because Tom Brady is so great that he has just demoralized them for all those years? I mean, it's a little back and forth. I mean, the Bears can. There's no one you. I'm sure Buffalo fans could agree with me in the same ways, as a Bears fan being on the opposite side of this list. How many times do you watch your team play really well against other good teams and other great opponents, and then they play the rival and the person who owns them, and it falls apart? Like, I mean, it just falls apart like hot knife through butter. There's just
Yeah.
something that those guys have on our teams, and it's very, very, very true for the Bears and Aaron Rodgers, and for Buffalo and Tom. Unfortunately for Buffalo, now they have to deal with Aaron Rodgers with the Jets.
That's very true. Yeah, now they get that test there in the division, but it is interesting too to be reminded that Tom Brady wasn't always great against the Dolphins. The Dolphins were that one team that kind
Yeah.
of got the Patriots a lot. Like that was a hard team to sweep
Gronk played
every year
safety
for
for
them.
them one time, and
Uh,
it was not did not turn out well for the New England Patriots on that Hail Mary.
it did not. Yeah. And the Jets too obviously had some of those years under Rex Ryan where they were pretty formidable as well. Then we come to Big Ben against the Cleveland Browns. This is kind of a meaningful, type of ownership because he's from Ohio. He went to Miami of Ohio, and Cleveland passed on him in the draft. So there were several components to this that really
Yeah,
probably makes Big Ben relish in this even more so. 26 3-1 career record against Cleveland with 47 touchdowns in those games. Obviously, what's going to sting the most is that his most recent playoff game at Heinz Field was a loss to the Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield a couple of
true.
years ago. But other than that, Ben truly dominated this franchise, and it was rough there for Cleveland for many years, and still is to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, all three of these, we start this list with domination from 2000 to current, or just within the last couple years. And all three of them are teams that have had a lot of success in that time period versus teams that have been really poorly run and poorly managed and poorly coached in that time period. And, in order to get dominance like this, it takes both ends of the spectrum, right? It takes three Hall of Famers, and it takes three organizations that have just been absolutely underperformers during that time period as well. And so
Yeah.
when you have that mix of a team that's well run with a Hall of Fame quarterback versus a team that is struggling to even just find the right coach, you're going to get absolute dominance.
And Aaron Donald has had plenty of those performances on the field. We already know that you can pretty much pencil him in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. But what he's done to the Seattle Seahawks is pretty impressive. Keeping in mind that he's an interior defensive lineman, he has 38 solo tackles and 15 sacks
It's
in
crazy.
16 career games against his division rival. 16 games, 15 sacks, and
Yeah.
38 tackles. Wild stuff.
And besides the year that Russ was injured, I mean, Seattle's been competitive. It's not like
Right.
Seattle's
Yeah,
been
they've been good.
a bad team. Aaron Donald came to the league after Russ. And so, I mean, again, that just goes to show you why he's going to go down as a Mount Rushmore defensive player of all time.
He's one of the most unblockable players ever, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's Reggie White 2.0 basically, if not maybe even a little, dare I say, a little more dominant at certain times. Cam Jordan, another probably one of those underrated guys along the
Yeah.
defensive line. His whole career, I kind of put him and Cam Hayward in a similar boat in that regard. Different positions, one's an end, one's an interior, but regardless, Cam Jordan's been a stalwart for that Saints defense his entire career, and against the Falcons in 24 games, 23 sacks.
That's
A
crazy.
sack a game for 23 games. That's a lot of games to stay that consistent and produce that much over that span of time. I will say the Falcons haven't had um, any great mobile quarterbacks out of sight, Marcus Mariota during that time, but nonetheless, Matt Ryan's a pretty smart, cerebral guy in the pocket, and for Cam Jordan to get the best of him that many times is that's tip of the cap right there to
Every
Mr.
one of these
Jordan.
guys we talked about on the list too so far, I mean, for the most part in their careers, really healthy players. Like in order to be
True.
dominant, you have to be available.
You
And
have to
and,
play
and
that
Cam
many
Jordan,
games.
he fits into that for sure.
The only guy that really doesn't have that type of stability, or I should say just like consistent availability, would be T.Y. Hilton at the end of his career.
Yeah.
Really suffered through a lot of injuries, but he has almost 1,800 receiving yards and 11 touchdowns against the Texans in his career. Many, pretty much all of that, I believe, with Andrew Luck. But what a great run that was against the Texans.
Yeah, I love this. I love this edition of the list because it was a reminder of that short span with Andrew Luck on the Colts and with him. They were, I mean, they were electric. Deep balls to T.Y. Hilton. That was old school, Deshaun Jackson, Michael Vick type just bombs. And Andrew Luck threw one of the best deep balls in the NFL.
Trayvon Diggs is an interesting addition to this
It's a
list
new
because
one.
he's had, a fairly short career so far. 5 games against Philly, though, he has 4 interceptions. We know how difficult it is
Yeah.
to rack up interceptions. And against in one of the storied rivalries like that, it's pretty impressive. And they've come in some big moments too. Most of these divisional games come down to the wire. But yeah, Trayvon Diggs, probably the one surprise on this list. But 4 picks in 5 games, that's nothing to sneeze at either.
No, not at all. He is the boomer bust corner in the NFL right now. He's going to make a hell of a play, or he's going to make a huge miss. So you have to live with that. As long as you have another corner in the back end that you really believe in, a guy like Diggs can be such a difference maker for a team.
Derrick Henry, the guy rushed for like 13,000 yards in high school.
His high school stats
That's
are
literally a
insane.
thing.
His high school stats are insane.
He averaged 3,000 yards a year as a high school player.
It's amazing.
And then he went on to be dominant in college too. It's like I don't know how they underutilized him his first few years in the league, but I guess that kept his legs fresh to some regard. 1,575 yards, and I think that says 16 touchdowns. A little hard for me to read there. 16 touchdowns in 13 games. It might be 15, but regardless, over a touchdown a game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Derrick Henry is a touchdown machine.
He is, yeah. And Derrick Henry is the guy that when he's playing the Jags, if you have him on your fantasy team in the line, make sure he's starting.
Yeah, 100%.
Make sure if he's got a match with the Jags, just start him.
You're going to want to put him in there. Patrick Mahomes has...
This is crazy.
Destroyed the Denver Broncos.
They haven't won a game.
They have not won a single game against Patrick Mahomes in his entire career. I wouldn't have guessed that, honestly. Like, I didn't know that he was undefeated against any of his divisional opponents. I would have thought maybe the Raiders would be the one team or something. But no, it's the Broncos, 11-0 against Denver.
He's been a full-time starter in 18, in 19, in 20, 21, 22, and now going to 23. So he's a full-time starter now going into year 6. This is year 7 in the league for Patty. And the fact that the Broncos have not won a game against the Chiefs since he arrived as a starter is crazy.
Absolutely wild. And then we come down to the final one here, Russell Wilson. By the way, thank you to the folks over at The Game Day who provided this list here and this graphic. Got to give them a shout out, of course. Russell Wilson in his career against San Francisco, 18-4 record against the 49ers.
Wild.
In many of those years were competitive. I mean, San Francisco only had a couple down years, really. And for the most part, they were as competitive and as big of a rival for the Seahawks as anyone. Especially remember those games, Richard Sherman versus Michael Crabtree, all of that stuff. I mean, that the whole career, 18-4 for Russell Wilson. Pretty impressive.
I mean, Russell, it's a reminder that that's what's so weird about how bad it was last year for Russell, because it's a great reminder that he had a decade of dominance in Seattle. And I remember when we started the show 3 years ago, literally the leading thing was like, how has he never gotten an MVP vote? Like, I was the Russell Wilson MVP train guy. And it's such a quick fall from grace last year that this year is such a fascinating year for the legacy of Russell Wilson. This is a make or break legacy year for Russell Wilson. And maybe it would help if he could lead the Broncos to a win against the Chiefs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, maybe he can finally,
If you get him a
start
win
his
against the
own
Chiefs, put
legacy.
him in the Hall.
There you go. There you go. That'd be a pretty big moment for sure. But Russell Wilson just needs to focus on getting wins against any opponent at this point in time. And but yeah, the Chiefs are going to be a big deterrent factor in all of that. So yeah, it was a fun list to pour over. Really, really interesting stuff from some of those for sure. I would not
I,
have guessed a few of those performances. That's for sure.
before we go, let me ask you this then.
Yes,
Who do you think in going
will be
into
the
this
next.
year is going to be like 2-0 or have a dominant who's going to dominate someone within their own division?
Well, I personally, I think it's going to be Trevor Lawrence against the Houston Texans.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably. If not the Colts. But I just don't think the Colts are bad enough of an organization as a whole to give up so much ground to Trevor Lawrence. But the Jags have kind of had the Colts number in recent years, so he's already got a leg up. But he does with the Texans too. So yeah, I would say probably Trevor Lawrence against the Jags. I don't know, or against the Texans. I don't know what the record is, but what about you?
I'm taking every NFC West team versus the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals could go 0-6 in
Oh, all
division
right.
this year. I think like
Rough.
Christian McCaffrey will get like a third of his yards rushing versus the Cardinals this year. Buda Baker's in camp, but he's not happy. They're in they're in a weird tank mode. New coach. Do they believe in their quarterback or not? He's not even going to start the season. I think Arizona pew 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 shots is going to be in some trouble.
I will say one last thing. A good prop bet or something like that would be to kind of going off this list preseason, having people bet on whether Trayvon Diggs is going to get a interception against
Oh,
the
there you go.
Eagles.
That's a good
Like
one.
not a game day prop. Like no, it's got to be a preseason thing. Like he's going to have over under 1.5 interceptions against the Eagles
One and a half.
this year.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it's either
huge odds.
right now he's 4-5 games, right? So, I mean, I guess you would put 0.5, but there would be tough odds either way, I'd say. But yeah,
Yeah.
probably 0.5.
I would take
Um,
it
but
just for
yeah,
the fun of rooting for that.
of course, yeah, I'd take
But I
the
never
over,
like to root
no
for the
doubt.
Cowboys. I that's good. That would be tough. It would be hard for me to then say I'm rooting for the Cowboys.
Before we leave, real quick, want to give a shout out to the guys at our podcast network here, the For Frequency Sake Podcast Network, who do an awesome event every year. If you're into fantasy football, you're probably aware of the Scott Fish Bowl, who runs leagues for charity. And we do something similar here at the network, helping local Toys for Tots in the Quad Cities area. So if you want to help support kids in the Quad Cities, or just give back in any way you can,
Yeah.
go to forfantasysaqc.com. So it's For Fantasy Sake, the original podcast that kicked this whole thing off. QC.com. Go there, sign up, and it'll just prompt you to offer a suggested donation to Toys for Tots. Join the league. Really cool. Appreciate that. And yeah, until next time. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy this content and want to see more, we've got you covered with full-length episodes weekly all year long, covering news from around the league. And during the season, we'll provide recaps from every matchup. So please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It really helps us out. Thanks for the support.